Hey guys, welcome to the Starting Million Show. I'm your host, Asher Au. Welcome. So to give you a little bit of background on what's happening today, usually this show starts about yesterday, okay? But we have a special, we're doing it a little bit different today because of a very interesting thing that happened. So just to give you a bit of background, what actually did happen was how I met my guest was this. I was actually part of his group. So I enjoyed my time inside this group, and afterwards I was connecting with different people. And what happened was one day I realized that I was kicked out of the group. I was like, wait, oh, I'm out of the group already. So clearly something I did wasn't good, wasn't acceptable. So what I did was that I reached out over to Mark and said, hey Mark, I'm sorry. I apologize for messing up. I didn't read the group rules. I apologize. Please let me back in. And he gracefully allowed me back in. So I was back into his group, interacting with different people because I found quite a bit of value inside there. And afterwards, I invited him to come onto this show to share some tips, some knowledge. And lo and behold, yesterday, right, what happened was because there was I would say human error because we live in different time zones. So it's like another thing that happened. So it's been quite tumultuous, I would say, in terms of the my experience together with him. But anyway, so I want to share. There's a little bit of background about our relationship with him. But what we're gonna do is that we're gonna I'll introduce him a bit shortly, but what I want to let you know is that some of the things I'll be asking him. I'll be asking him how to build a massive group on Facebook, right? He built it to 21,000 without spending any money on ads. He also any useful insights in the years of engaging members, how did he grow his business, and what to possibly avoid doing that could cause some kind of harm in growing his own group or growing your own group, right? For those who want to learn, right? So so that's why I'm going to be asking him later, and yeah, let's get the party started.
You cut me loose and set me free. You cut me loose. You make me win in every way. Win in every way. You show me how to spread my wings. Yes, I'm the winner of the day. You cut me loose and set me free. You make me win in every way.
So Mark Mawini is a lifelong entrepreneur who helps coaches get more clients without paid advertising. He achieves this with his coaching programs, his podcast, Natural Born Coaches, his Facebook group, The Coaching Jungle, and his exclusive print newsletter, Secret Coach Club. He's been a speaker at events like Social Media Marketing World, frequently makes media appearances, and contributes for entrepreneur.com. So you can learn more about Mark at www.naturalborncoaches.com. So without further ado, please allow me to welcome Mark onto the screen. Welcome, Mark. Woohoo!
Hey, Arthur. Full disclosure, I'll start by saying that it was my fault for the mix-up in the time. I'm in Canada, you're in Singapore, and when I did the conversion, quick check, obviously I messed up. So yesterday you messaged me, hey, Mark, you almost ready? I'm like, no, we're not doing it for another 24 hours. We talk, I'm like, oh, shoot. So that was my bad, not yours with that. But thank you for being flexible and doing it today and having me on the show.
Thank you so much, because I really appreciate it, because this, I think, is a sign of a lot of humility, right? It's a sign that you're able to just accept that. I think a lot of people might not want to just breeze through that, but thank you so much for admitting that. I really appreciate you for saying that. Yeah. So, all right. So let's get started. I know you're a very busy man, so because you do have a lot of things going on. So perhaps maybe you can just share with us, Mark, a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I'm in Canada, Atlantic Canada. Beautiful part of the world, 10 months of the year. January and February is a little cold. But my whole thing is, you mentioned, I help coaches get more clients without paid ads. And I've been doing it since 2014. Before that, I spent about 10 years in real estate throughout my 20s, building up a big real estate business. And then everything collapsed with it. And to make a long story short, I had to get the help of several coaches and mentors to get back on my feet because my whole world was blown up several times and it was in a really dark place. So I didn't know much about coaching until that happened, and I got introduced to it that way. So when I was back on my feet wanting to start a business 2014, I thought, wow, this coaching thing, I got a front row seat for. I would love to do it. And here we are, almost 8 years later and going strong and having fun.
Oh, thank you for sharing. That's an interesting background. So it's quite a whirlwind change from inside that the real estate business the way you're right now. So it still has to do with people, but it's definitely now you're doing it.
It's like Darren Hardy wrote the book The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster, and that's what it was like. It's what's that meme and what the people think it's like for an entrepreneur? It's a straight line going up or whatever, but then what it's really like, and it's squiggly, it's going back and forth, it's all over the place and messy. So that's me in a nutshell. But hey, it's interesting. It's never a dull day.
True, very true. All right. So, but what made you really decide to focus very much on coaches? Because, when it comes to this industry, to serve people, coaches get targeted a lot, especially these days. But what made you decide to specifically focus on them?
Well, early on, I had a very broad focus, and I would work with any entrepreneur. Basically, I said, hey, I love entrepreneurs. They don't get enough support out there. Entrepreneurs, as a mentor of mine says, entrepreneurs make the world go around. So I said, I want to help any entrepreneur. And I realized after enough time doing that was too broad. Don't get me wrong, I was working with some cool people, but it just wasn't. I was working with two coaches as clients I had more fun with than the others who owned widget shops. One was a gym and stuff like that. So I said, you know what, I'm going to focus solely on coaches. This is what I'm having fun with. It's gelling with me. And then I'm going to, anyone else comes to me, I won't be able to help them. I'll refer them to someone who I know that can help them. And I've stuck to that. So even to this day, someone reaches out to me that has a business that is not coaching, if it's anything else, but I probably know a business coach who can help them. I refer them off because I only work with coaches.
Okay, so I think that's one of the advantages of having the 20,000 membership, because if you definitely know someone that could help someone else.
Yeah,
I think that's the advantage of that.
Exactly. Yeah. And with my podcast, I've had the opportunity to meet really cool people just like you. You're doing a show, and I've done 700 and almost 730 episodes as of today. So chances are I know a coach who can help someone if I can.
Wow.
That's in there.
700. My gosh, that's a lot. I've only kind of like started. I'm definitely below 700 at the moment. So that's a lot of work you've done.
It was a daily show for the first year. So that's where the numbers bump up. If anyone's doing the math and say, well, wait a minute, he's been doing a show for a little under 7 years. It was November 2014. How's it at 700 episodes now? Well, it was the first 350 or so were daily. It's a weekly frequency now, which is much better. I keep my sanity. It's a lot of work doing a daily show, but it definitely condensed the learning curve there, and I learned a lot quicker by doing 300 and some episodes back to back every day.
I'm pretty sure. So you spoke a little bit about, because the times have changed, you've gone from 300 over to now a weekly show. So currently, what is the goal for your business?
Well, here it is, if anyone can see. That sounds bad to say make money, and I'll explain so people don't think, oh my God, he's greedy and horrible, only cares about money. I find in our world, in the coaching world, a lot of coaches are afraid to admit that they want to make money or make a profit. They're almost, and I'm not sure, I'm sure you've seen this, but they're a little sheepish, and you say, well, why are you doing it? They say, well, I want to, impact the world, or I want to help people and stuff like that. Well, that's great. But if you're not turning a profit, you're not going to be able to help people, or not many people, or at least not be able to stay in business as long as you want. So, I started this business. I make no bones about it. Like, yeah, I'm in business. I have to make a profit, and I want to make a big profit because then I can help more people that way as well. And me admitting that, there's not a lot of people in the coaching world that come out and admit that they like money. It seems like they have weird mixed up feelings around money. And I'm trying to get coaches past that, get them proud to admit that they're capitalists, they're in business, and they have to make a profit.
Oh, for sure. All right. So definitely, I think that's a great goal to get coaches recognizing that making money is not a problem, right? It's not something, icky, right? It needs to be there.
There's a great saying, you can't light up the world if you can't pay your light bill. So that's one to remember.
That's the first time I heard that. That's an interesting quote there. All right.
I didn't come up with that, by the way. I heard it. I think it was Michael Beckwith said it, but yeah, it's a great quote.
It is a great quote indeed. Okay, so all right, so let's get real quick dive in deep, because I want to dig into your brain in a little bit, right? So let's start with some of the easiest question. But in this social media day and age, why should coaches, or why should people start their really own Facebook groups, and what are the benefits of having it?
Yeah, so the online space, it's a noisy, crowded sea of people, right? I thought it was noisy when I started online in 2014. Now it's 10 times that. And especially since March of 2020 with COVID and more people getting online, it's gotten even noisier. So you need a place to bring people. It's not enough to be floating out there and, putting your message, trying to cut through all that noise. You need to be able to bring them somewhere that they can get to know, like, and trust you, ideally, and then they can become clients and customers. So the metaphor I use, it's like, you're in that noisy ocean. If you don't have a Facebook group or community to bring them to, you're on a little tiny raft in the middle of the ocean. You want to build an island that you're bringing people to, where they can get to know you, and it's your island. In my case, the Coaching Jungle Facebook group's a big part of it. Doesn't have to be Facebook groups. If your people aren't on Facebook, maybe they're somewhere else, but Facebook groups for the majority of entrepreneurs and coaches works with it. So you want to be able to bring them somewhere. And I'd argue the other thing people should be doing is building an email list, because email list is something that you own, and something that it can't be taken away from you with it. But Facebook groups have been a huge part of my growth, and I highly recommend them.
All right. Okay. So when it comes to the Facebook groups itself, right? Like I think in the way I kind of explain it a little bit to some of the people I know is that it's kind of like the updated version of list building, right? Because a list build is a one-way communication, but a Facebook group allows a two-way communication where you're giving content and they can interact back. So I think that's one of the benefits. But also when it comes to having a large group to this size, there's a lot of administrative work, right? So is that going to be more tiring? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, I was doing everything myself for the group, and then I had a few volunteer admin. Now I have an admin team that I pay, and they take care of everything. So the story that you related earlier on, sorry for booting you, but it was my team, not me. I'll pin the blame on them. But no, I don't know everything going on in the group, because there's a lot of activity going on in that size group. So they handle moderation, admin, and I'm not blaming them. That's the job that they have if a rule's broken. Now, you handled it the right way. You messaged me. I could tell that you were not a spammer. You were sincere, and honest mistake, not a big deal. I said, okay, yeah, no problem. We'll let you back in and just have a quick look at the rules. The type of people that we try to keep out of there are the ones that join the group, and then 1.5 seconds later, they're spamming the wall, and it's just a lot of, promotional stuff. They clearly didn't read the rules, and we have to do that so it doesn't become the Wild West, and then it's not a good user experience for anyone who's in the group. So yeah, definitely you want to have an admin team. It doesn't have to be paid maybe in the early days if you're not monetizing your group yet, but at least get some volunteers. Maybe it's clients or people who are in the group who like it, that want to keep an eye on it. And you don't want to let the stuff slip through the cracks and a lot of rules be broken, because then the group's going to get really clunked up with spam and other stuff, and it's not going to be an enjoyable experience for anyone.
Definitely. Okay. I think that means you have a good team. That means you're behind the right people, where they are better to cut, what do you call it? Better to ask for forgiveness and ask for permission.
Yes.
Right? So you just cut them out first, and afterwards you get the real people come back. Hey, let me back in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been in groups before. There was one I remember years ago that I used to enjoy. It was a group for coaches, and it used to be a great group, but then the owners or the admin stopped moderating it, and basically the wall became the Home Shopping Network, where it was just offer, just vomited all over the wall, and there was nothing that was legit stuff to learn from. So I ended up leaving and thought, well, this is the group lost any usefulness for me and for a lot of other people. So I always remember that story, and that's why I don't feel bad. I tell my admin team, enforce the rules and don't feel bad about it, because at the end of the day, it's our group and we're spending a lot of time and energy on it. So we want to make sure that we keep it clean.
Definitely, yeah. And I think welcome Jivan John as well. So indeed, there's a need to have rules for your ever-growing community. That is for sure. Yeah. So take me back a little bit in time, if I may ask, right? So, like, how did you actually build your group to 21,000 members without spending money? As because if I don't remember wrongly, you started your group approximately about 5-6 years ago, if I don't remember wrongly.
Yeah.
And if we divide that out, right? So that's about 20,000 divided by 5 is about 4,000. And 4,000, that means on every day you're adding 10 new people per day. So take me back all the way to the start. How did you get the growth from zero to where to something? How take me back to that?
So a little bit of the background, the Coaching Jungle group started in September of 2015. So we're looking right around 6 years ago. Now, before that group, I had another Facebook group for past guests in my podcast, in my podcast called Natural Born Coaches. So it was the Natural Born Coaches past guests group, real original name. So anyone who was on the podcast were invited to come into that group, but it was only for guests of my show. So I had a couple hundred people in there at that time. What was happening with my old group was I was getting requests every day from people. They must not have noticed the name of the group, past guests. They'd just see coaches in the title, and they were requesting to join the group. And I had to answer all of them. I had a message I copied and pasted. It'd be something like, hey, Asher, thanks for requesting to join my Facebook group. However, it's only for people who've been on my podcast. So basically have a nice life, take care. And after enough of those, I thought, wow, there's so many other coaches who haven't been on my podcast who want to get into a Facebook group that maybe I should have a group that's open to everyone. And that's when I killed the old Facebook group for the podcast guests. And I opened up the Coaching Jungle, and it was for anyone. Now I say anyone, doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's coaching currently. It could be someone who's an aspiring coach looking to get into it. Maybe they're interested. But the only profiles we don't allow in is if someone doesn't have a profile picture or there's no information on their account, the chances are they're probably a spammer or something. Or if someone's a member of, say, 2,000 groups, they're probably a spammer and we don't let them in. But yeah, that's how the Coaching Jungle started. And I was lucky in a way that we were able to get our first 500 or so members pretty quickly because I had a following from the podcast and I had other people, quite a few people I knew, including guests of the podcast. So we had more of a head start maybe than other groups. But then we grew it just, I talked about it constantly. So I always say I was like the parent of a newborn baby that can't shut up about how great the baby is. Every day I was talking about, here's my Facebook group, this is what we're doing. You got to be in there. If you're a coach or you're an aspiring coach, you got to be in there. And I do that even to this day. I do things like this to promote the group because that's needed. You can't just open a group and then hope that people find it. You have to be proactive and do certain things. Another quick tip, anyone who has an email list, good place to do it. When someone subscribes to your email list, they get the autoresponder with, let's say they're getting a free gift for opting into your list. You could put right in there, PS at the end or whatever. If you're not already a member, here's my Facebook group, this is what we're doing, and here's the link to join. So I get people who are joining my email list who didn't know about the group who are then coming in as well.
Okay, so that was actually, so you started because most of the people who came were the guests or past guests, and from that you transitioned, you made a new group, you brought them into this new one, and more people came. So did that come through like really just organic reach, or did you, because you actually, like you said, you promoted it out there. So can you just share a little bit more about what were the promotional activities you did that were not based on spending money, that
Sure.
got more and more people in?
Yeah, so I still haven't spent a cent on any ads or anything to drive people in there. Not saying that I'll never do that, but I haven't to this point. One of the big ones was stuff like this, going out on other shows. So every time I'd go out on another show, I would make sure to mention the Facebook group. By the way, you can get there at thecoachingjungle.com. There's a shameless plug, thecoachingjungle.com. But I would make sure to mention it in there. So every time one of my guest spots when I go on another show was released, I would notice a bump in requests to join the group. Just because of that. So that's another way to help, because if you're not going out on shows now, you're missing an opportunity. I see a lot of podcast hosts only do their show and they think that's enough. I think you really have to be on both sides of the mic, like not just doing your show, but also getting out in front of other audiences, being a guest and mentioning it in there. Other things we did contests. I mean, you got to be careful of Facebook's terms of service, but we would do fun little contests inside the Facebook group, like where we'd give away Amazon gift cards, for example, or we did Starbucks cards once, or books and stuff like that. And that people aren't used to that in Facebook groups. And that was something wasn't really expensive to do. They're $20 gift cards and we give away 10 of them, so $200. but a lot of people would be like inviting their friends in, because that would help them win the contest. Basically, if that was some of the contests were around growth of the group, other ones there was other things we were doing. But it's all about trying to be different because there's so many Facebook groups out there. A lot of them are doing the same things, so you have to try to do unique stuff to get people interested.
That's a good strategy. So I think I was just reading a book. I think it was YouTube Secrets or something. Definitely by YouTube Secrets, and they
Yeah.
had a quote inside there that was saying, "It's by Sally Hawkshead, I think, who said this. Is different is better than better." So it was just interesting they shared that. So
Yeah.
So okay. Maybe if I may ask you a little bit question, a bit deeper, is how did you get yourself onto getting onto all the different podcast shows or like being a guest on other people's shows? How did you do that?
Well, sometimes I'd be invited, but there were times when I'd have to take the initiative. So a good example is Entrepreneur on Fire, EO Fire, John Lee Dumas. That's a huge show. I don't know what his download numbers are now, but he used to be 3 million downloads a month. So I was on his show probably 5 years ago. And people say to me, "Oh my gosh, how did you get on John's show?" And I said, "Simple. I asked." Now John will be mad if a bunch of people start reach out to him. It's tough to get on there. But what had happened was I knew John because he and Kate, his wife or his girlfriend, they helped me start my show. I was involved in their Podcasters Paradise program, so I knew them. I'd had them on my show as well. We did interviews, so we had a little bit of a relationship that way. So I reached out to John and said, "Hey, I think I have something for your audience, and here are a few ideas. Any way I could be in your show." And he said, "Mark, I'm booked up solid." He said, "Reach out to me in 6 months," or he said something like that. I put it right in my calendar that I made sure that the morning of 6 months in the future, John would be getting a message from me, and I did that. Hey, John, you asked me to follow up 6 months. How's it looking? He said, "Sure, Mark, come on in." So I know it doesn't sound like any magic thing. It's pretty common sense. I asked him, but that's how you have to be sometimes. But the other thing I do to get a lot of interviews is I put the word out there in the Facebook group, other places I'm going. I say, "Hey, I'm opening up some spots, guys, to get out on shows. Here are a few ideas for talking points. And if you have a show and you want me on, let me know." And then they reach out to me that way. So it's all about being proactive.
Very cool. I will definitely be looking into that because I too want to grow my own group. So thank you for sharing that strategy. And definitely very much. Thank you so much. So, but now that you've grown your group to this point itself, right, how do you actually balance, providing value and monetizing a group? Because there are some people who start out the group and they go straight for the kill, right? They just go in and start to promote and promote and promote. How do you balance between monetizing a group and providing value at the same time?
You're right. It is a balance. So you can't go too far if you're all 100% value and free stuff, but not selling. And then you're not monetizing your group. You're not getting an ROI, and it's probably not worth it. If you go the other extreme, like you mentioned, and it's just all sell, 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 people are going to tune out. So you have to find a balance. Me in there, I technically sell in my group every day, but not every post. It's just at least one post a day is a promotional type post with a call to action. But I make sure that I'm mixing other things in there. So there's lots of content that's in there that's free. Right now, we've got a number of guides units in there that, like, as a learning thing where people can go in and get free resources from it. A good example here, perfect example, is of doing something that doesn't seem like a big deal, but people appreciate it. So one of the people I've learned a lot from is Gary Halbert, the old copywriter. Rest in peace. I think he passed away in 2008, but he was a prince of print, he called himself. And yeah, a lot of people, really learn a lot from him, and I did as well. I've had people reach out to me that I don't even know them, like, "Hey, Mark, thank you so much for Gary Halbert's newsletter. I'd never heard of it before. I love it." I have them all printed up. I killed a forest printing them up and putting them into binders anytime I need a kick in the butt or looking for inspiration. So there's an example of doing something that's not selling, it's providing value, and it's introducing people to really good resources that they can learn from.
The book, for those of you who don't know Gary Halbert, his book is definitely all his newsletters. Is it all, or there's a majority? I think it should be all. It's available online. I read through everything as well. It's definitely very good learning. Really, really good learning.
Yeah, the boron letters. I don't know if you've read that
Yes.
one. Yeah, the one he
Yes,
wrote
yes,
when
yes.
he was in jail. That's a whole long story. But he wrote that book, and it's a small book but very powerful. But because I think more people should know about him, it's copywriting. A lot of people say, "I'm not a copywriter, so why do I need to know?" If you're in business, you're a copywriter. You're going to have
Oh,
to
yeah.
be one way or another. So check it out.
Consistency is definitely the key to get to that number. So I think Mark is just by the sheer consistency of growing from his group from like you said, even 300-400 to where it is right now, 21,000. It definitely requires a lot of work and consistency. So maybe if I can rewind back a little bit, just a little bit, what got you? What got you so dedicated for such a long time? Because people can lose passion over a project pretty quickly, but you've continued doing this for a few years.
Hmm. Uh, so I'm thankful that I had my past life was real estate, even though it didn't end well, but it instilled a lot of good habits around consistency. So when I was in real estate, there are certain things that I did every day. I made 20 phone calls to potential home sellers, and I had certain things I did rain or shine. So when I started coaching, I took that same approach. And I've been asked before by people, what would you credit your success to? What's your superpower if you had any? And I've always said consistency, which a lot of people, it's not a sexy superpower. If you're showing up every day, it's not always exciting, but it's something that's needed because in the online space, there's so many people who, yeah, they could be motivated for a while. A couple weeks they're doing something, they're all gung ho, but when they don't see any results from it, they stop and they disappear, and then they're looking for the next bright, shiny object. The way I approach it, I look at, I don't know, is baseball big in Singapore? Is it a big thing? Or
Not really.
No. There's a old baseball player when I was growing up with the Baltimore Orioles, Cal Ripken Jr., and Cal Ripken Jr. has the record for consecutive games played. I think it was over like 16 seasons he played every single game of the season. And in baseball, Major League Baseball, there's 162 games every year. They're playing pretty much every day or night of the month. They get a couple days off. So it's really hard on the body and stuff. Well, he has thousands of games played in a row, and he holds a streak which will never be broken ever. So I kind of look at myself. I look at Cal Ripken Jr. He showed up at the ballpark every day, whether he's feeling a little bit off, if he was sore, if he was in a bad mood, he played, and that's how he amassed that streak. So if you're showing up every single day, good stuff's going to happen. There's a story that I remember a coach told me, and I always remember this as a cautionary tale. She had a year where she broke her revenue record. She had an amazing year, and she was really proud of it. So to reward herself, she decided to take the first 3 months of the new year off, January, February, and March. And she thought, well, I'll come back into April. And she booked an Airbnb somewhere down south, warm and sunny. This was pre-COVID, obviously. So she booked an Airbnb for 3 months and went off the grid. And anyway, she came back in April, and she said that her business, she almost had to start it from scratch. Like, people forgot about her, which she never thought would happen. So I'm not trying to say don't take vacations, but there's things that she could have done there to schedule stuff to go out to make sure she's staying top of mind. And I always remember that if I ever feel like not showing up one day, I remember that tale. So I've posted on social media inside my Facebook group every single day since I started it. I've done daily emails since April of 2016. I've yet to miss a day. That's my big thing, to do daily emails. And some days it's multiple emails, but at least one email every single day. And I view it almost like a machine, machine Mawini, showing up every day, whether I'm feeling like today is kind of a blah day. I was telling you before we went live, my part of the world, in the northeastern United States, getting hit with a hurricane right now. I'm in Atlantic, Canada. We're getting the side effects of that. We have a lot of wind, rain. It's just a messy day. We've had beautiful weather. Today is not beautiful. So I could look outside and be kind of like, oh, blah. Like, it's early in the morning here. I really don't feel like doing this interview, with Asher. I'm just going to go back to bed and, or whatever. Well, I didn't do that. I like doing this. And so rain or shine, I show up, in there, and I do what I have to do. And that's a key. Just be consistent, show up every day.
Thank you. I'm feeling inspired from you sharing that. And rain or shine, just keep trucking on and just be consistent doing the work. So again, for this, because what you've been sharing did trigger a question in my head again, is because, I think for a lot of coaches and providing value is easy. I think a lot of coaches, is providing value is like it's not a problem. I want to help, I want to give, I want to share with the world what kind of talents and what kind of knowledge they have. But it is the monetizing part that they have problems with, right? So at which point, for example, in your business, did you were comfortable with the idea of promoting and selling something on a daily basis even?
Yeah, I think again, real estate, I have to thank for it because I'm seeing a lot of similarities between real estate and coaching, which sounds funny. People say, well, what's the thing? But when I was a young real estate agent, I got started at 21. I had no money. I had student loan debt. Any of my friends weren't house buying or house selling age. I was 21. I looked like I was like 15 or 16 years old. So now I definitely look my age. I got, a lot of a lot of gray. I bought a bottle of wine the other day and I made a joke to the girl who was ringing it in. She asked for the ID of the two girls in front of me because they looked younger. So when I got to the cash register, I pulled out my license. I said, I'll get my ID for you. And she laughed a little too hard, and she said, oh, no, that's okay or whatever. And I said, believe it or not, one time I used to get ID'd when I was in real estate. I'd buy a bottle of wine as a housewarming gift for a client, and they would always ask for my ID, and it annoyed me. Now I wish I would get ID'd. So anyways, that's off on a whole other tangent. But I looked very young in real estate, so I had to work hard throughout my 20s to build what I had to build. And that served me well for coaching because I was never afraid of sales because real estate's commissioned, at least, in Canada when what I was doing it. So if I didn't sell houses, I wouldn't get paid back then. So you have to sell to eat. And same thing goes with coaching. We don't get salaries or whatever. You're in business. So I was lucky when I got started in 2014. I didn't have much of a problem to promote myself because I had to do that for years in real estate. But, a lot of coaches come from a background where they never had to sell. Maybe they were a teacher, a nurse, they were in human resources, something like that. They find it very difficult because they've never had to really eat what they kill, so to speak. And that's a lot of people I'm working with are like that. I'm trying to get their heads around that whole money thing. Again, I showed the picture behind here. I'm saying, hey, look, don't be afraid to make money. You're going to be a much better coach when you're making money. You're going to have more energy. You're not going to be distracted. If you're broke and you're trying to coach and you got bill collectors calling and the phone's ringing and you're worried about money, that's not the right energy going into a coaching session. So you want to make as much money. It's going to help your clients as well.
Thank you for sharing that. This definitely is definitely a great story you shared also. So, also one other question I got to ask because because while you're growing, while you're like promoting and selling, is there anything that people should do in their group that they should avoid rather that might potentially harm the growth of the group?
Oh, boys, how much time do we have? Well, one thing we already talked about earlier is if you're not moderating the group and deleting spam and having rules that you enforce, that's going to hurt the group ultimately because it's just going to be a jumbled mess. Not selling, we've talked about as well. That's a mistake. Not showing up in your group. So if you're not showing up in your group, Asher, then I'm in there. I'm like, well, why am I going to be active in here? The group owner doesn't even care enough to do anything in here as well. So there's another mistake. Another issue, maybe this isn't something you're doing in the group, but more with your whole group in general, is being too broad with your focus of your group. So I see a lot of Facebook groups out there that are success groups or motivational type groups, and I'm not trying to knock that. I think that their heart's in the right place, but they're a dime a dozen when it comes to Facebook. Like, I think it's really important people look at your group and your group name when they're deciding whether to request to join, and they can tell, okay, this is who the group's for, or this is what it's about. So with my group, I knew that I wanted the keyword in the group. So the coaching jungle, I knew I want to have the word coach or coaches or coaching in there, so people knew it was for coaches. Dentists, shouldn't say stay-at-home moms because some of them would be coaches, it could be, but let's say dentists, doctors, accountants, they know the group's not for them. It's got my keyword in there. Can I tell a really quick story actually about naming?
Yeah,
because some people might think, well, how do I name my Facebook group, my podcast, my book, or whatever. This is a story more about my podcast, but it could give some ideas to your audience for naming something like their community. So when I started my podcast in 2014, same thing. I knew I want to have the keyword in there. One of the keywords like coaches or coach, coaching, etc. I was stumped for names. I was just jotting down names and I wasn't feeling anything, or it was taken. So I decided to do was I was going to look at the top 100 songs for each year from 2014, because that's when I was looking, from 2014 down to 1990, going back. And then I was also going to look at the top 100 movies as well. And I was going to see if I could do a play on one of the names for like the song titles or a movie using my keywords. So I started with the songs, going through all the Billboard list and everything. And I was inserting coaches or whatever in there to see if I could come up with something kind of fun. And I had some really bad ones. So for example, I used to own the domain. I thought I was going to call my podcast New Coaches on the Block, just like New Kids on the Block.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the URL is now available. If anyone wants to grab it, go right ahead. But that wasn't going to work. So I went through almost 25 years of song list, and I just wasn't feeling anything. Then I went to movie list and did the exact same thing. And I was going down every year, and anything I was slotting in my keywords for, I just wasn't feeling it. And I got down to 1994, I believe, is when Oliver Stone released his movie Natural Born Killers. And I slotted in Natural Born Coaches. And I'm like, I like the ring of that. So then I did what is most nerve-wracking 10 seconds of any entrepreneur's life, is when you race over to GoDaddy to punch in that perfect domain you think. And you're like, oh, God, please don't be taken, please. Luckily, it said it's available. I said, great, I'll grab it. And here we are today. And I remember hearing John Lee Dumas talk about with Entrepreneur on Fire. That's how he came up with the name of his show. I think he said he was folding laundry, and he had sports replays on the TV in the background for the NBA, for basketball. And LeBron James or whoever had a good night, and the announcer said, LeBron's on fire. And he's like, Entrepreneur on Fire. And then he did the same thing. He raced over to GoDaddy and had to check. So there's a story that's away from Facebook groups, but it's about naming things, and it could give some ideas for people who are stuck on a name.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's definitely, I think, inspiration comes in all angles but it's more important to take action at the point of inspiration rather than just like, I'll get to it later. But okay, so you shared a little bit about the story, because maybe you can share with us a little bit of a story about how you've actually helped a client, okay, in your coaching business, how you help them to improve.
Boys. Well, there's one client that always sticks out, because she was a sweetheart, very nice person, and her heart was in the right place. But she was getting stuck on promoting herself. Like, I knew she was doing well from working with her. She had told me who she was getting as clients and the successes she was having. But when I was looking at her social media stuff and her emails, because I was on her list, I do those things for my clients to keep an eye on them. I didn't see any of those success stories. And I said to her on the next session, I said, well, I know you're doing well. You told me how you filled this group program and you helped this person or whatever, but you're not talking about those client success stories or testimonials. And she admitted to me that she was holding back because she didn't want to look like a braggart. She was worried that, people would think she was like Donald Trump, or something like bragging about stuff. I'm the greatest coach in the world or whatever. So that's why she was holding back. And we changed that to get her more comfortable with blowing her own horn. I said, if you don't blow your own horn, no one's going to blow it for you, basically. She stands out because she had a goal of leaving her 9-to-5 job. And I believe within 3 months, she had transitioned over from 9 to 5 to coaching. So I'm not the type of person, if I'm working with someone that's working a 9-to-5 job, oh yeah, quit your job on day one, and then we'll get to work or whatever. That's probably a stupid thing to do, because then you're going to be under pressure. You need to get clients right away, or you're not going to be able to eat. I like building up a bit of a runway. You don't want a 10-year runway, but like she did it perfectly, where within a few months, she had her coaching business rolling enough that she was able to transition over.
Okay, cool story that you shared. Thank you. I think that's we definitely always a lot of these stories is something to learn from, because when it comes to small success stories, I think these little bits of inspiration will definitely help us to push on further. Right. Thank you for sharing the story.
Yeah.
So And okay, so in this now, if we're coming near the tail end, so because really thank you so much for sharing ideas. I got a lot of takeaways. I'm definitely going to implement some of the ideas we shared together. So one thing I would like to ask is that just to get you to know you a little bit, right? So if you had one key idea to impact 1 million people, what would that be? Now, the reason why I had this was because in the course of our lifetime, it's not hard for us to it's not hard to imagine that we can impact 1 million people, 1,000 people, and in turn they can also impact another 1,000 people. So 1,000 times 1,000 is 1 million. So it's not that hard to think of that. So if you had one key idea that you could share to 1 million people, what would that one key idea be?
Stop caring so much what other people think of you or what you're doing. You know, it is online. You could get 100 compliments or positive comments on a post. You get one person that disagrees with you or trolls you, and then you focus on that one instead of the 99 people that, or 100 people that liked what you were doing. So you've heard people on their deathbed talking about this, you know, that they wish they had not cared as much what other people think. With it, because what ends up happening when you do that, you're playing in what I call the mushy middle. The mushy middle is where it's safe. You're never going to offend anyone. They're not going to unfriend you on Facebook. They're not going to unsubscribe from your email list. But that's because you're being bland and boring and you're holding back. You want to be on the outer edges, you know, where you're eliciting a strong response. People either absolutely loving you or hating you. But the people who love you will come to your defense, and you're stirring up those emotions. And in a lot of cases, you're going to get those people who hate you who come around as well when they see what you're doing with it. So I'd say stop caring so much what other people think. They're probably not thinking about you as much as you think they are, and just do your thing.
I agree 100%. I think that's some of the things I always tell people as well. You know, people aren't going to remember as much. There's still a lot of space. One of the things I like to share with some people is, you know, if I ask them, can you actually name anyone in the top 100 Forbes, the top, you know, Forbes 100 people? 99% of the time they cannot name a single person. I'm like, that's how much space you have. No one even remembers who's at the top. You know, there's a lot of space.
The story I always remember, Mel Robbins from the 5-Second Rule, she wrote. She has a column in Success magazine, or she had one. And years ago, she wrote, I don't know if it made news in Singapore or not, but do you remember there was that Democratic politician, Anthony Weiner, of all names? He was sending wiener pics to women who weren't his wife on Twitter, basically. And anyone who doesn't know the story, instead of sending them as private message, he was posting them to the public timeline so everyone could see pictures of his private parts that he was sending to women. So anyways, Mel Robbins had told a story when this was blowing up, and it seemed like everyone was talking about it. It was even in Canada. There was, you know, I'd heard about it because I follow politics, but she was in a cab in New York City, and Anthony Weiner is a New York politician. That's his hometown. And she was just making conversation with the cab driver, and she said, "That's pretty crazy what's going on with Anthony Weiner now, isn't it?" And the cab driver said, "Who?" And she said, you know, Anthony Weiner, the politician, getting in trouble on Twitter and all this stuff. He had no clue who he was. So her point was that cab driver's too busy worrying about paying his mortgage. Maybe his wife's sick. Maybe his daughter's dating someone that he really doesn't like and he's worried for. He's got his own issues going on. He's not worrying about what Anthony Weiner is doing. So she was saying if Anthony Weiner, people aren't, and not everyone is actually thinking of him, or not much, they're not talking about you at the dinner table. They got their own issues, their own stuff on their plate. So that, I just say that to back up my story. Don't think everyone's watching everything you're doing and that they care as much. Just do your thing, push ahead.
Thank you for sharing the story. I love it. I'm definitely going to remember this story. It's not a hard story to forget.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Pun intended.
All right. So if people, so I love puns. So I always try to slip that in somewhere. All right. So okay. So if people want to connect with you, you know, where can they go to find out more?
Yeah, so we mentioned the Facebook group is at thecoachingjungle.com. So I'm in there every day. The podcast is at naturalborncoaches.com. And that's kind of the central hub for everything as well. So the Facebook group or naturalborncoaches.com.
All right, cool. Thank you so much. So once more, head over to either the www.naturalborncoaches.com or thecoachingjungle.com to learn much more from Mark. All right. So before we end, Mark, is there any final closing words from you?
Boys, I always remember an acronym from Robin Sharma, and it's KMF, and that means keep moving forward. So I think as entrepreneurs, you have to be prepared you're going to get knocked down. That's inevitable, but you have to get back up and keep going on. So remember that acronym. You don't have to tattoo it on your body, but that would help. KMF, keep moving forward.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing, Mark. I think you are a complete natural. Clearly, you've been doing this for a while, the natural born for this, and you've been doing it for so long. You are a natural. Thank you so much for coming onto the show, taking on these quick fire questions. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for watching, guys.
All right, see you, Mark. I'll see you in a bit. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining the show, and it was truly my privilege and honor to be able to have a chat with Mark. Okay, so I've learned a ton. And I hope you too have learned as well. So, in case you haven't done so, friends, or if you haven't done so, please remember to follow me at It's at Asher Al. I need to show that on screen here, right? So follow me at It's Asher Al on Facebook and YouTube. And if you want to be a guest on the show as well, just feel free to leave me a message and pop me a message and just hashtag guest. We have a chat and we'll see and bring you onto the show. Now, if you too happen to be a coach and consultant and you're a content creator and you want to start your own business online, how to properly create a group as well, hey, feel free to join over my group over here at significantstrategy.com/free group, and we could have a chat over there. All right. So anyway, with that said, thank you so much for joining in. Once more, thank you everyone for joining the show. Appreciate your time, and I will see you next time.